testing new paint today. Spontaneous style. Wait, yeah! Like a karate chop to the palette. I have no idea what that means. Hello Minders, welcome back to the Mind Watercolor. We're going to do some testing today on paint, but really we're just going to do some painting. I'm going to do another spontaneous landscape, which I think is super fun to do, and it's probably one of my most requested type videos. So we'll get that Renesans paint out and actually put it to the test. I've got a color story, which I'll show you in a minute, and I'm going to use a limited palette of just 4 colors. Kind of do a farewell to fall little landscape. So hang around whether you're interested in Renesans paints or not. What's that? What have I been testing? Renesans paint, the Polish paint. Where have you been? You haven't noticed a new paint? I think your headband's a little too tight. Oh hush. Anyway, on to the painting. So I decided to use a limited palette of these 4 colors, and this is sort of the color story that I created. Indanthrone blue, red ochre, chromium orange, and manganese violet. There are 4 single pigment colors, and they combine in a lot of really neat ways. These 3 colors here, the violet, orange, and the red ochre, will make a number of different really nice fall colors. So that's pretty neat. And of course the indanthrone blue can go for a sky, can go for the cools, and will combine really well with the red ochre for various grays, from a Payne's gray to sort of a warm gray, or give you some nice deeps and darks. So that's what I'm using today. So the paper I'm using today is Stonehenge Aqua Cold Press. This is their heavy block, which just means the 300 pound. I've not actually painted on the 300 pound. I know that I really like the cold press, 140 pound cold press, but it's the first time I've tried the 300. So I'm anxious to do that, and we're going to get started. This will be a landscape, and about all I plan on these is just the fact that it will be a landscape. And, you know, horizontal. I think a little bit about composition. This is my oval wash. I think this will be a good brush to start with. Silver Black Velvet oval wash. It'll give me some nice big wide washes, but I can also use the point. So I can probably paint longer into this without switching brushes. And I've got a little Z composition, sort of a Z or an S composition there that I just started with. I mean, it's just sort of, oh, let's do this. You know, that's what spontaneous painting is. It's just spur of the moment thinking. And you saw the color palette that I'm using. So these are 2 of those, the manganese violet and the indanthrone blue. And I figure I'll have some trees over here on the left. And I'm just doing an arcing motion here to kind of render leaf canopies. I saw so many beautiful fall scenes that I wanted to paint and never got around to. And I thought, oh, before, you know, fall is completely gone away. Well, it is completely gone away, but before it fades from my mind's eye anyway, I would do some more fall painting. Just misting, and you know, this is where mind watercolor comes in. Watercolor's mind engages and does things for you, and you just sit back and kind of take delight in it. That's what I like about these spontaneous paintings, and that little run to the bottom. Well, I couldn't predict exactly what would happen. I hoped something like that would happen. So, partnering with the medium, that's what I always like to say. And spontaneous painting for me is just, it's a matter of do a little bit, then react to what's happening on the canvas. And do a little bit more, then react to what's happening on the canvas or the paper. I'm getting the chromium orange employed here. This is Renaissance Chromium Orange, which is like Azo Orange, PO62, I think. Those strokes are just meant to be a little bit angular. I thought, well, I wonder if I can make any rock sort of formations happen, but it didn't really work out. So, I just try different things, different strokes. Here with these horizontal strokes, I'm establishing a ground. So I thought this is a good place to establish a ground. And I want to keep this a vignette. So that's what I'm doing. And you see this little run there that happened spontaneously? That's awesome. I mean, I just think that's awesome. Didn't plan for that, but there it is. And I'm just filling in some of the white areas. I don't want a lot of white areas. Those white areas are meant to be sort of sky and distant air, sort of tree holes, bird holes, some people call them. Then down here near the ground, usually it's darker. So I'm just adding some color and adding some deep tones there. While I still have the wet aspect, I want to continue to make use of that. So the strokes are all kept broad and general. There'll be plenty of fussing towards the end. In fact, I did more fussing on this than I thought I would, but we'll get to that. Mixes of indanthrone blue and manganese violet. And I'm beginning to pop in little darts of contrast where I want to see those increase. It's always helpful to have those little passages, and they help you delineate shapes, as it goes along. So I try to make sure I keep plenty of little, corners, edges of contrast, I guess you could call them. You need contrast in a painting, and those little corners and pops of contrast help define in a negative sort of a way, negative painting sort of a way. They help define the shapes in front of them. So look for opportunities to do that. I'm doing that down here also. A lot of that wash down lower is starting to dry, so I'm not getting as much wet action. But I do want to carry some detail down so all of this wash that ran down doesn't just disappear. Now I could keep a lot of this very abstract. I really wouldn't have to do a whole lot more here than this. Maybe add a few branches, and I'd have an incredibly loose sort of abstract piece, and that would be just fine. But I'm in a detail mood, so I'm going to add some detail, as you will begin to see later. I do have this on a gentle angle. I don't know, maybe 30 degrees. That's always pretty nice, actually, on a landscape, because it allows paint to run down in each of the little areas, and mostly light comes from above on a landscape, so the base of things is usually dark. And I'm just painting in some underside of some boughs with some deeper color, just sort of to simulate or render some dimension to the tree boughs. Oval washes are a very versatile brush in this sort of thing. I actually don't use them as much as I really think that I should. Every time I use an oval wash, I go, yeah, this brush really is very versatile. And then I end up putting it away and not using it for a while. So was glad to remind myself of that again. Again, I'm seeking out some of those little corners, pops of contrast. I tend to like to put them down in little V's. This is another sprayer, not the mister I had. This puts out coarser droplets. If you watch my channel much, you've seen me use it. The little drop. See all those little droplet backwashes that developed as soon as I did that? Just gave all those runny washes new character. Now we're skipping ahead to me putting in a distant line of trees. Something paler, cooler, just meant to invoke distance. I'm using the same little arcs to represent, little leaf canopies. Just mixes of, again, indanthrone blue, some manganese violet, tiny bits of the red ochre in there. And you notice too that I've mentioned this in other landscapes, but I make the little leaf canopy areas smaller strokes, because what you got to be concerned with in landscape is scale. Your distant trees, the detail has got to be of a scale that's convincing. In animals and humans, they call it proportion. In landscape, I like to call it scale. It's really the same thing, just a different genre. Here I'm just using this Sterling Edwards glazing brush to pull out some sort of dry brush little textures. We're going to detail some of those areas a little bit into grasses as we go. I mean, you can see in this process how much the paint has done and just left me with areas to develop and coax. That's what's so fun. Oh, look at this area here with the backwash. This watercolor just painted a bush for me right over there, and I didn't do anything except put the water and the paint down. Nice little backwash bush over there. I'm going to pop in a sky with some indanthrone blue. I'm just pre-wetting the area. It's just going to be a little segment of the sky, and I'm trying to paint around those trees. So I want that real wet. And I want it to run off and get deeper at the top. So I just turn it upside down so the paint will run that way. And it looks like I'm getting the paint really, really dark, too dark for a sky, but you'll see as I blot and blend this stuff, it really lightens up. And then when it dries, it lightens up even more. So it won't be this dark. And with a drier brush, I'm just lifting out some streaky areas in the sky. Just want a hint of some sky and clouds up there. Turning it back over here, and you can see the sky is a little drier now, so I'm just dabbing in. Want maybe one little detail area in the sky that looks a little more discreet as a cloud. And here I'm just blotting with tissue to create a more distinct edge in just a few little places. And you can see how subtle now that sky is, and that's really all I wanted. I didn't want anything to detract from the painting. Decided over here on the left to negative paint in a stand of tree trunks. I didn't show this in the video. I ended up fussing with this area quite a lot because I thought it was too stark to begin with. I ended up toning it down a good bit later because I just thought it stood out too much. Here's more of the process of me pulling out these little edges, these little V's of contrast. Contrast is really a spice of your painting that can make it really shine. So basically I'm just going to show you areas where I continue to do this and kind of skip around. It helps me define shapes. Helps me negative paint the lighter areas in front of it. Helps bring definition. My favorite thing to do in paintings like this is to leave some areas loose, washy, and to define others. It all becomes a design, where you go from distinct, crisp design, sort of edges and tree trunks and branches to washy, loose, nebulous areas. It's a favorite way for me to paint. So I'm just picking out areas to add tree trunks, and this just really starts to make sense out of these little canopy leaf foliage shapes. I really should be using a rigger here. I just didn't switch. I usually like to do branches this fine with a rigger, so I don't know why I didn't switch. You're going to see me switch brushes a lot towards the end here, and it really has no practical reason other than I see a different brush and I want to try it. I'm a chronic experimenter. Now, I've been noticing a characteristic of the Renaissance paint, and that's that it lifts incredibly easy. It's something to note if you're interested in Renaissance. So what I'm doing here is I actually pulled out a small M-gram palette to put some of the same colors. I'm still using the same color palette, but put some of the colors down with M-gram because I wanted to compare how it lifted. It actually surprised me in some areas where I was putting down paint pretty wet on top of an underwash, and the underwash lifted up more than usual for a watercolor paint. Turned out not to be an issue in terms of messing up painting or anything like that, but I did have to adjust for it. I ended up doing some tests later that confirmed that, yeah, it does. It lifts much easier than, say, M-gram or even Daniel Smith. So just something to be aware of if you're interested in Renaissance paint. Now, I will also add that Stonehenge Aqua has a very hard sizing. It lifts easier than, say, Arches. So the combination of the two made for paint that lifted and reactivated very easily. Just adding some branches and tree trunks to that distant line of trees kind of makes some sense out of that area. More edge defining. contrast building. I like the way that lower sort of curlicue is pulling your eye up into the scene. This is a thing I like to do with riggers a lot, is turn it on its side and brush up. You get all these neat little ground texture things. And I'm pulling more detail down into this area. I've mentioned this in other demos, and it's true again here. I'm not a detail for detail's sake person. I don't go around and detail everything just because I want to detail. I mean, maybe a little, but there always has to be another reason for me. Like I'm adding contrast, so when I add that detail, it's pulling my eye there because I feel a need for my eye to be there to see that area pop a little more. If you just evenly go around a scene and pop in detail, sometimes that doesn't work. It fights with itself. So when you add detail, you want to be judicious and purposeful about it and have reasons for detail other than just to define something. See, I felt like I needed a little more pop down in the end of this curlicue composition, so that's why I'm adding some here. So this contrast is taking the form of grassy ground texture, but it's not there for my purposes. It's not there just to add detail. It's there because I wanted contrast down there. And I'm just negative painting some of that same detail around this light area. As I said earlier, I could have left this painting alone earlier and made it a more nebulous, abstract sort of impressionistic piece, but this time I wanted to really get in there, fuss with the detail a bit. And I think this is where I'm going to leave it, and I've actually done some more to it that I didn't know I was going to do, some rocks and whatnot, but really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Renaissance Paints is meeting my expectations and painting out just lovely. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you patrons for supporting this channel and making this content possible, and we'll see everyone in the next video. Bye-bye.